We're going to have a little talk now about ground balance. Now this subject confuses a lot of people, and to be honest with you, I can understand why. There's so much talk on social media about lowering the ground balance and how it makes the machine perform better, etc, etc. There's a few tips I just want to run by you and just give you a better idea of what ground balance is all about. Lots of people say lowering the ground balance will give you more depth, and this is absolutely true. It will give you more depth, but what's the trade-off? You're going to start hearing lots of noise from hot rocks and the ground itself, so you've got to try and find a happy medium, and in most cases between 88 and 90 is going to be absolutely perfect. Ground balance isn't the be-all and end-all to metal detecting. It's just a part of it. It's a feature there within your detector, and it's something you don't have to use unless called upon. Different parts of the world determine different ground balance settings. For example, here in the UK, we don't have a massive problem with hot ground. Okay, there's small patches, there's small areas about the country, but in general we don't get a very strong signal from the ground. The biggest problem we have in a lot of places in the UK is iron contamination, and that requires a completely different set of adjustments. So ground balance, what's it all about? Well, the machine sees the ground as a target, just like it will see a coin or a piece of jewellery. What we need to do is eliminate the ground from the target range so we don't hear it. And that's why we ground balance, to eliminate the ground. It's as simple as that. Now the ground changes all over the world. For example, gold bearing areas tend to have a lot of hot rocks and the ground is very, very hot. So a critical ground balance is essential. Now how do we know if our ground's hot? Well, that's really, really simple. We look at the right hand bar on the screen. It's called the mineralization bar. And when sweeping, take a look at it. If the bar is quite high, that indicates you've got hot ground and there may be an advantage to ground balancing. If you haven't got a bar, or perhaps one or two bars, it's telling you that your ground is not very hot. And this means there's not a strong enough signal coming from the ground to warrant any problems. Let's take a typical coin. Pass it across your search coil quite close and you will get a reliable target ID meter reading. Now as you move that coin further away, the numbers will become less reliable because the signal's weaker. And this is exactly what's happening to the ground. If you've got weak ground, your target ID numbers for the ground range will be unreliable and they'll chuck up random numbers. And if you're in tracking mode, your machine will track to them random numbers, and very often it will track too low, so you'll get lots of false signals from the ground or hot rock. Hot rock, here we go. Let's put the hot rock on the ground. We're using Deus Fast, and as we sweep, I'm getting 5 bars on the mineralization bar. Now if you pump it, quite often you'll get a stronger reading, but just to mimic your detecting, I'm sweeping it, obviously over a clean piece of soil. So here's the hot rock. I'm going to put it on the floor and listen to see what happens on the standard Deus Fast program. Absolutely nothing. We won't even know that hot rock's there. Now if I go into manual and start lowering the ground balance, 86, 84, can you hear the hot rock started to come in? 82. We've introduced the hot rock by lowering the ground balance, and it's a high tone. What happens if we go even lower? Just for argument's sake, 75. We've made it stronger again. And back up to 90, the factory default 90. 90. Gone. I've just demonstrated the hot rock. Let me lower the ground balance again and show you the shake value. Now I'm on 74, just for argument's sake. So can you imagine when you hit against stubble or rocks, this is going to drive you mad. So if you're going to use a low ground balance, you need to make sure that there's no obstacles the coil's going to knock on, because by lowering the ground balance, in a nutshell, you're making the search coil too hot. You may not even know you've got hot rock in your ground, but trust me, if you lower the ground balance below the hot rock level, you certainly will start hearing it. The ground notch feature, it's exactly what it says. If you want to run a lower ground balance but you're pestered by hot rocks, all you do then is notch out hot rocks from the ground range. But bear in mind, for example, if you run the ground balance at 70 and you lower the ground notch to 71, so from 70 above it's all greyed out, it's exactly the same as running ground balance at factory preset 90. So there's really no advantages to using a long line of ground notch. Just use enough ground notch to eliminate your particular target. Ground balance and discrimination are two separate things, but sometimes their paths cross. Let's take the hot program number 9 for example. It uses a sub-zero discrimination. It goes down to -6.4. and using -6.4 will accept the ground. But unlike the test earlier with the hot rock gave a high tone, a positive tone. Now if you're using the -6.4 discrimination, you introduce the hot rock and the ground as a low tone. Program number 9, the hot program, we're using a sub-zero discrimination, -6.4. High tone for a good target, low tone for a bad target. Let's try it over the hot rock now. Can you hear it? It's coming up as an iron tone. And as you can see, the XY screen is straight across, indicating ground. So how do I get rid of that using the hot program? I just make a simple adjustment to the discrimination. -5.8, it's completely gone. So if you want to eliminate the ground and hot rocks using the sub-zero discrimination, just raise it up a bit to -5, -4, something like that, and you'll still pick up the iron and the good target. So that's the beauty of the sub-zero discrimination on the full tone program. At -6.4 you can hear all the ground, so you've got a good idea of what's under your feet. If you don't want to hear the ground and hot rocks and things like that, just keep raising it until you've eliminated the things you don't want to hear. It's as simple as that. When you're adjusting the ground balance, you'll notice 3 little dots under the number. They're just fine increments, 1, 2 and 3, so you can get a real fine adjustment on your ground balance settings. Tracking. Now that's okay to use if you've got gradual ground changes. It's not worth using tracking on an iron infested site. The machine will just get confused. And also remember, if you haven't got a strong enough ground signal, your tracking will track to random numbers, so you never know if it's right or not. It's always best to use a fixed setting and adjust it if needed. So by adjusting the ground sensitivity, you can make your machine more or less sensitive to the ground minerals, and that's as simple as that. Earlier Deus models had a very high ground sensitivity setting as standard, so you got lots of random numbers. But with the latest versions of the Deus, the factory preset ground setting level only gives you numbers when it sees that the ground is hot enough to perhaps make a decision on ground balance. If not, you'll just see the icon -- and it will factory reset to ground balance of 88. So you don't have to do nothing. Once again, if you stop swinging, you'll see the numbers stop and -- will appear, and it'll default to 88. And once you start swinging again, if you go over a patch of slightly higher ground, it will then show the numbers, or indeed track to those numbers if you've got tracking enabled. So the ground sensitivity is a really good feature, providing you use it with caution. Why see numbers if you haven't got a strong enough ground echo? Well, that's it for my very quick talk about the XP Deus ground balance. I could go on for hours about this subject, but I just wanted to keep it brief and simple. Thanks for watching, if indeed you still are, and I'll see you on another Skill School video.